Yeah, you can take it to the bank. Hold the line. Hey,
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to Take It to the Bank podcast. Today we are talking about smallmouth bass with the Elite Series Pro from up north, Mr. Jonathan Kelley Fishing. At least that's his Instagram title anyway. So let's get into the round of applause here. That's our live studio audience here at Casa de Ballou. So, welcome in. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. And you're getting ready to head up, do some smallmouth fishing, and got to be your favorite time of the year from, being up north with that Yankee accent that you got.
Absolutely. I love it. I mean, it's actually going to finally start to cool a little bit. So that's kind of nice. Usually that kind of triggers the bite no matter where you are a little bit better. So looking forward to it. And I can't wait to get going. I'm actually rolling out to Lake Oneida tomorrow, which is actually what we're going to talk about on this show. Kind of give little hints here and there for those just getting started, but going to do a little practicing, just, tuning things in on smallmouth before we head to St. Clair, and that'll be on Sunday.
Got two derbs coming up.
Polar opposites too.
Complete polar opposites. Both of them are northern fisheries, but complete opposites. And I hope it cools up some. It is hot as two rats cracking in a wool sock in Tennessee right now.
Yeah.
I'm talking heat advisories. I mean, it's just dumb. You just go outside and start sweating walking from here to the boat shop.
Yeah, I was packing up today, and my dad walked up to me in the shop, and he goes, "You hot?" And I'm like, "Yeah, a little bit." Had to pack the kitchen sink times 2 for these next 2 events because they're so different. Like, I literally told him, I said, "What's in the boat? Every single thing's going to get ripped completely out, and then everything that's in the truck is going to get put back in the boat for the second event." Like, it's crazy how we can go to 2 northern fisheries, but they could be so different. And I'm talking rods, reels, line, baits, hooks, everything.
Largemouth versus smallmouth. Not that the Mississippi River don't have a smallmouth, but usually dominated with largemouth.
Yeah, but even the smallmouth there, you're going to catch them completely different than you would, a Great Lakes smallmouth.
Well, let's talk about that some. So when I started, the very first time I ever went up north fishing, I was actually filming my first show with Charlie and Fishing University television show. And I knew nothing. Like, throw a drop shot around, put you a flatworm on it. Know very little about it now. I've learned a lot from just being around the sport for the past 4 or 5 years. And northern smallmouth are a different creature to me. Mm-hmm. But to me, like, where they're at usually makes sense. Seems to me like,
as long as you have mapping.
As long as you've got mapping, you can get around them. And there's so many of them, and they're pretty freaking dumb.
Yeah, for the most part. At least that's what I feel like. And if you don't find the dumb ones, you go look for the dumb ones.
Yeah. There's tons of different fisheries that, the big name tournament fisheries that you go to, the St. Lawrence River, Lake Erie. The list goes on and on and on. Saginaw Bay, which it's a little bit different. A lot of times they're called largemouth there. But all these Great Lakes, do they set up quite a bit, alike?
Yeah, very similar in terms of a lot of the fish that are on the majority of these lakes up here, smallmouth especially, like to be around some sort of piece of cover. So up in the north, we have rock. And then we have some shell as well, but for the most part, it's just rock. You got like the little shell and, zebra mussels mixed in with it. So you just start looking for rock and you're going to eventually find them. Like, it's nothing crazy, and the good thing is on any sort of sonar there is out there, rock stands out like a sore thumb that was just hit by a sledgehammer.
Even if you can't have live scope, don't have live scope, don't know what a live scope is, you can find smallmouth with side imaging typically.
Yep, side imaging, even 2D. You're going to just see that in your 2D over and over. So it's pretty easy. And then usually once you get around it, you find the biggest clumps. And that's generally where the bigger fish relate to. The bigger clumps of rock and then the biggest rock.
We're right here. We're in the very, end of the into December, I'm going crazy. We're right here in the end of July, 1st of August. All these fish now are post spawn. Most of the time, they're spawning middle of June to the middle of July, something like that.
Yeah, depending on where, even May, you can basically say second week of May to second week of June is like the really peak start, and then that June to a little bit into July is kind of where that last wave of them will go, and then usually by July 1st in the majority of the places they're done. Like this year on Ontario, they last a little bit longer on beds, but we just had a cooler spring into summer.
As a whole.
So it definitely pushed it back 2-3 weeks compared to normal. I mean, it was definitely, we fished, I think, an Elite Series event at St. Lawrence the same time I was up there. We did it 2 or 3 years ago, and there was not a fish left on bed. And this year there was still probably a couple thousand, I'm sure, like generally across the whole place. Like I found 20 to 30 myself. I'm sure other guys found 20 to 30 themselves. So
It's smallmouth on bed could be the dumbest animal that I've ever seen, I've ever tried to fish for. Like, they're idiots.
mm-hmm.
Incredibly aggressive.
Sometimes, though, they aren't. I learned my lesson on that one. I spent 45 minutes on one the first day of the tournament I was there, and I called it everything you could possibly call it. We're not going to say the words I said. And I never caught it. And that was in a tournament with my dad. 2 days later, my dad took my mom out to the same fish, and she caught it in the first drop.
They've still kind of got to be in the mood, but as a whole, like I've seen I fished a Toyota at Champlain a few years ago, and I've seen boaters like catch a fish, looking at it. The boat's sitting basically on top of it. They look at it, they catch it. It won't help them. Whatever. They turn it right loose. The co-angler pulls up there and catches it, puts it in the box. I mean, 30 seconds afterwards, when they get right, they're incredibly dumb.
Yeah, I've fished for a handful of them, and I've lost them, and you just drop back down, and sometimes right away they bite. It's pretty crazy.
Can you pattern smallmouth like you can largemouth, as far as this is a spawning area and they should be moving out to deeper structure here, and kind of follow them along contour lines or something like that? Or is smallmouth a little bit different, where they're more of a open water fish?
I feel like smallmouth are more come and go, open water. I don't think it's as by the book as largemouth, where you can kind of follow it out. So, like, you have your spawning area for largemouth. Typically, there's 2 points because it usually intersects going into a bay. They're going to get on those points. If there's some secondary points beyond those points, they also get on those on the way out. But for smallmouth, I feel like it's just more like they roll in and then they kind of roll right out. Now, if there's a sand spot or something like that, they might stop. But for the most part, I don't think we catch a lot of those fish that are in between stages. I think we just find those fish that spawned way early and we're out catching them a little bit deeper, and then kind of gets a little tough in that range. And then we got to wait for that next group to come back out.
Okay. When smallmouth spawn, let's pretend like this is June. When you're looking for spawning smallmouth, what kind of things are you looking for? I've noticed gravel is kind of the biggest thing that I've seen.
Well, they do like to spawn around individual rocks. So if you find individual big rocks in anything 10 foot or less, so that could be a 6 foot tall rock in 10 feet. That makes it seem pretty shallow for a bass, So they can spawn right up underneath that rock, especially if it's in a place with current that kind of takes the current away. But for the most part, other than that, it's usually gravel mixed with some sand, is what I found. Like, they like a clean area. And I don't know if it's because they don't have to do as much work. Those areas typically don't get slimed over, don't get caked over, so they don't have to really clean it out as hard as they would if it was a grassy vegetation area.
Speaking of vegetation, it seems like it's everywhere when you fish all these northern fisheries. You get close to a bank anywhere, there's quite a bit of vegetation there. Excuse me. Is vegetation a big thing that you're looking for when you're smallmouth fishing, or are you just strictly looking for boulders and rocks and rock veins, that kind of thing?
I do, as long as there's some rock mixed into the vegetation. If it's just straight grass, you're not really going to find smallmouth in it that well. But if you find that grass is kind of growing up on the edge of some rock piles or like little rock strips, that grass will grow on the edge of those strips. That's where they'll mix in. Like the Oneida is big for that. There's a lot of I think they were dumped years and years and years and years ago, just rock clumps. They were dumped off the back of a barge, and around those rock, well, they're little humps, like they're literally smaller than the size of a boat. Grass has grown around the outside, so like if you get around them, you can make a perfect cast where you're kind of like casting over grass, but you're going to go down and hit the rock, and it's where the fish typically sit.
And that's on Oneida.
Mm-hmm.
On the more Great Lakes type stuff, all that's glacial deposits, I'm assuming.
Yeah, the Great Lakes, you're not going to find as much grass, at least in most of the ones that I typically fish. And when you do find the grass in those ones, they're going to be more bay related, where you're going to go catch some largemouth and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
I found actually on the Great Lakes, when you do find grass, you find bass in it, but they're usually the smaller ones, like 1 and 2 pounders, ones that you really don't want.
And that's some stuff that blew my mind. Like this tournament I fished at Champlain, a lot of smallmouth are on bed. The guys that knew what they were doing up there absolutely wrecked them. And I caught 16 pounds the first day, 16 and a half, 16.9. I mean, decent bag, I thought. Caught fish at every single spot that I stopped. Like, I had a pretty decent day.
Yeah, fun day.
I'm probably going to be in 70th or 80th. Like, for my first time up here, very first day, like, I'm not too mad about it. Now, I was in 129th. And that's what blows my mind is there's such a difference between a 3-pounder and a 3.5 pounder, or a 3 3/4. And I started looking at them the last day of practice, and I'm like, oh God, they're on bed everywhere. And I can't tell the difference between a 3 1/4 and a 3.5. But there either are a lot of guys that could, or a lot of guys that caught them and then weighed them and turned them loose and could tell, what size fish that there are. And that's something that a lot of people coming from the South don't really realize. Like me, I want to get around a population of fish on Kentucky Lake, or get on, any rivers or anything like that we fish down here, even, herring fisheries, or wherever you're fishing highlands. And I want to get around a population of fish. And if you're around a lot of fish, there's going to be big ones mixed in. But it seems like up north, they group up by size a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say for sure. I feel like they group up in the categories of like you're gonna find 12 to 14 inches and less together. You're gonna find 2 to almost 3 pounds together. You're gonna find 3 and 4s together, and then when you usually find 5s and 6s, that's usually what you're gonna catch. Like, yes, every now and then there could be 1 or 2 smaller ones mixed in, but for the most part, like if you find a population of that true big size, that's what's going to be there. And that's how the guys do so well in tournaments, because a lot of times it only comes off of 1 or 2 spots, but it's just every time they're catching fish, they're 5s, so that adds up to 25 pounds pretty quickly. If you get 6, 7 bites in a day, chances are 5 of them are going to be 25 pounds worth.
That's insane. Just that, guys are at broken 100 pounds in smallmouth. Like that never used to happen before forward facing sonar. Even the guys at the NPFL this year at the St. Lawrence River couldn't use forward facing sonar and still had 76 or 77 or something in 3 days. Like, was on pace to catch that much. Now, do they do that if those fish aren't on bed? I don't know. I don't think they probably do. You could really see it in the Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit deal that was last week. When they had their scope day turned off, it made a big difference in most of the top 10's weights. I mean, they went from 23, 24, 25 to 18, 19, 20.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's hard to predict, and it all comes down to what tournament it is and when. Because like the MPFL had the perfect storm, where we had a delayed spawning season. So when they were there was still fish spawning, and then there were still fish shallow that came just off the beds, and they stopped on some sand, some of the slat rock and stuff like that. So those fish were in groups, maybe just off the bed, like I mean, days off the bed, and they were catchable. Another week, a lot of those fish that they were catching kind of might have started to spread out, and you'd kind of like lose them for a 1-2 week period before they then hunkered down on the bigger boulders out offshore more. And that they just hit that perfect. And then when you come into what was just there, the invitationals,
Yeah, the Tackle Warehouse
I
Invitationals.
think that's just a completely different beast in itself because they got to practice for scoping. So I'm going to say a lot of those guys don't even care about the non-scoping day. If you're trying to make the third day and fish the third day, you're going to practice scoping. It's 2/3 of the event. So I think that's why you're going to see a lot of the guys falter on day 2 for that. Not because they can't catch them. It's just the way they caught them and spent all their time, I think, was related around the scoping. And then when they got it turned off, it just wasn't as easy. If they had more time to practice it without the scope, like the MPFL, where they can't use scope at all, I think they would have had no problem catching those 20 to 23 pound bags more consistently. I just think it was the matter of you're so limited on where you put your chips in the basket when you have to practice that way. Like that would be a big challenge, I think, in my eyes.
It was so cool. A good friend of mine, Brent Anderson, is from right here locally. Guides all summer on the St. Lawrence River. Tennessee River Hammer, understands current extremely, extremely well. He and his roommate Clay Reese, both top 5 of the event. Brent finished 4th, Clay finished 5th, and they were the most consistent, other than Chris Johnston, who absolutely just wrecked them every day. But they were the most consistent of anybody else throughout the tournament because they weren't really scoping fish. They were caught in the river, not out on Ontario, and those guys knew those river stretches that they could drift, and they didn't really fall off on that second day when they couldn't use scope.
Yeah, a lot more drifting involved when you're in the river, and you can, consistently not have to use the scope, especially for them. I know they probably have a little bit more experience up there when the amount of
For
time
sure.
spent. So that helps, just finding the drifts and current changes a little bit. So you kind of get a clue of when to be where, when not to be where. So it definitely goes a long way when they know it more from experience based off of someone who's just there for the week and they go out there on day 2, they have no scope. They can't see if the fish are there still, like even if the current slacked off a quarter of a mile an hour, those fish could have shifted. And without the scope, you have no idea. So what are you going to do? Drag for an hour and you don't get a bite? Then you're like, okay, I got to leave.
Right.
So you're already behind. Same thing if you go to your second spot, it happens again. You're behind even more. And I'm sure there a lot of that happened for those guys because that current there plays a huge role.
Does it play a role in every Great Lakes northern smallmouth fishery? I think that was something that I didn't realize was a deal, but there's current rolling throughout these giant lakes a lot more than you realize, and a lot of it's wind current.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's wind current, and I think it moves them. And because smallmouth are a fish that love to move so much, I think that adds to the challenge of trying to stay on them and relocate them and whatnot. Because with that wind current, it changes so often and changes direction. That's the biggest thing. Like, there's been times I've been at the St. Lawrence River, and if you get an east wind, current flows the wrong way. Like when you get further down where you're in the Clayton area. I actually, years ago, it was right after I was out of college, I led a Toyota series there after 2 days. That was pre-scope. So I didn't know what I was casting at, but I was using my eyes and I was specifically casting at a seam on the water. Like it came around an island and I could visibly see the seam on the surface. And I called it 6-pound seam. And then the one next to it was the other 6-pound seam. So I would just go and I'd cast right at the seam and right at the seam. On day 3, when I ran an hour and 20 minutes down there, I get down there, the seams are gone. So I fished.
Different wind direction changed the current completely.
Wind direction changed the current completely. So I fished them, never had a bite, went shallow, and there was some grass shallow where I was fishing, and the grass was laying towards the lake while the last 2 days the grass was completely folded over, laying the other way. And I was like, thank good. Well, that was a terrible day, and I did not win that tournament.
Well, let's even when current flows through these Great Lakes, sometimes they're big enough that it spreads out and it doesn't matter as much. St. Lawrence River is kind of a deal on its own to me, and because it's all current related, at least a lot of it is till you get out onto Ontario. But let's talk about Oneida. Let's say a guy's going up there. We're fishing a Bass Open. We're fishing a Toyota Series. One of these bigger tournaments, and this is a lake that you know well. And let's dive into going through breaking down this lake on how to go potentially win a tournament up there. I'm going to share my screen here. Screen. Okay. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
So this is Oneida Lake. It is in Syracuse, New York, right off of Lake Ontario, actually. And it's the thumb of the Finger Lakes. There's Seneca and Cayuga and Oswasaco. I don't know. And which are all phenomenal fisheries. And Oneida is kind of the thumb of the Finger Lakes, is what I've heard it referred to before. And Oneida is a cool place. I fished an open there as a co-angler 2016, 2017. Like, really enjoyed it. It was my very first time up there catching smallmouth, and it was cool. It lays out east to west, and if there's one thing that can screw you up north, it's wind, because it's all open water, it's all big water. And if you catch a really hard east wind or a west wind, Oneida is almost unfishable. Even it being so small, it still gets really, really rough.
Yep. The shallow water factor on the entire lake in itself really makes that a challenge. So east and west, anytime you get over 12 to 15, you're pretty much guaranteed 4-footers. And they get really close and tight there. So it makes it really hard to run a boat through it. And when you got to launch in the way bottom left corner, it's pretty hard to go anywhere.
This Oneida Bay Marina, I think that's where.
Nope, it's the next one up.
These here.
A little further up to the left.
Oh, is it farther than that?
Yep. Right there.
That one.
Yep.
So that's where all the big tournaments are coming out of. Oneida Shores Park Campground, far east side of the lake. Now, it's a big lake, but it's not giant. I mean, you can run from one end to the other in 15, 20 minutes, something like that? Yeah, 30 minutes?
20, 25 minutes.
Not crazy to fish the entire lake. When you start looking at this lake, what's the first thing that pops up to you if you've never been there and we're looking for smallmouth? What stands out to you the most?
All the offshore humps and structure that shows on a map, whether you're more in the dead center around the Shackleton area or more towards that eastern side around all the humps and the islands that are over there.
The eastern side?
Nope, you're going. Oh, I'm in western side. My bad.
Yeah. No, you good. Yeah, so humps, islands, all that kind of stuff. Those are the things that you're going to want to key on. And there's more out here than a man could fish in a week. There's so much offshore structure.
Yep.
So are you starting on Shackleton, or are you going on some of these smaller islands that are quite a bit shallower, that kind of thing?
I personally don't. And I know we talked about this. I personally don't spend a lot of my time on Shackleton. Now, that's not because it's not worth it. Shackleton's one of the best areas on the lake. It's actually where probably the majority of people go to first, just because of the true size of it and all it has to offer. The reason I don't is just because I have a lot of experience up there and time on the water. I like to be able to run around and bounce from, the north side to the south side, fish a little bit on the east, fish a little bit on the west in a tournament day. So to go to Shackleton, that's more of you need to go out there for a few hours. You need to kind of go in and out throughout the humps, there's, some grass and rock mixed in out there. And to do it the way that I like to do it, you can't do that out there. So for me, I target other areas around the lake, but Shackleton is one of the best areas for you to start because of its true number of fish and size that does live out there, because that is the true dead center of the lake. It's generally has the deepest water with structure on it.
And that's what separates it from a lot of the other lakes as far as Oneida, is the fact that it's not as deep as many of the other places that you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, on average, you don't catch a ton of smallmouth on Oneida much more than 16, 17 feet. And you go in a lot of other places, and it's pretty much that's the minimum once they get offshore.
Okay. Well, man, when you pull up to the boat ramp, we're gonna put into boat ramp here to Oneida Shores. What's the first thing you're looking at? We're putting up there. Obviously, we're going to fish it in the summer. And are you looking at watercolor? Are you looking at clarity? Like, what are you looking at to really start your search?
First thing first is the water level. Generally, it stays the same, but there were a few years we've had in the past where it's been a lot lower than others. So what I'm going to do is I'll tell you exactly what I'm going to do tomorrow. How about that?
Okay.
I haven't been there in a month. Tomorrow we're going to go up there. We're going to launch at Oneida Shores. So if you want to zoom into it, and go directly across to like the northeast a little bit, right there. So you see Shaw Point.
Yep.
Just to the east of Shaw Point, there's a couple humps, so a little island type thing, some shallow bar areas. I'm going to go over there first, and the reason for that is it's somewhere close. I can right away go see if the fish are going to be shallow, like if there's going to be any sort of 3-4 foot bite going on some of those shallow shoals that are over there. They don't show it too good on this map, but there is a lot over there that only has like 3-4 feet of water on top of it. But then also I'm going to be able to fish the edges of those in that 12 to 16 foot range. So right then and there, in just like about a mile or two stretch from where you are there to the east a little further, there's probably a dozen or so humps, hard spots, rock areas that I can kind of fish in and out and determine kind of where I want to dictate the rest of the day.
So will you actually start that shallow in 3 or 4 feet, like throwing a chatterbait or something like that? Or what are you starting out here in the deep water and working your way in? Where do you start most of the time?
Most of the time I'll start out deeper, like in that 12 to 14 foot range, and then I'll work my way in. Definitely going to have, a bladed jig or a spinnerbait or a hair jig, something rigged up to go try shallow. I know when I was there a month ago, the bottom was really clean and sandy in some areas, which we haven't seen in the last few years. In the past few years, it's been very slimed over and mucky in a lot of areas. So I unfortunately didn't pick up on that until the last hour of a tournament I fished there a month ago, of how clean the bottom was in the shallows, that is. So I kind of want to go and see if I can, investigate a shallow bite. It's real fun when you can get on those school shallow and just throw some big line on them and just rope them.
What is the typical water clarity on Oneida?
Oneida is clear, but in terms of a Great Lake, it's not that clear.
Okay.
I would say you're going to have about 3 feet of visibility. I know, like I said, when I was there a month ago, it was a good 4 or 5 foot, maybe even 6 foot. It was much cleaner than it typically is. I think a lot of that has to do with just a lot of the shallows didn't have the muck like they had in the last few years. Like, saw a lot of nice sandy bottom, and it's just something we haven't seen since like 21. It was the year I fished the Open there. That was the last time I seen that nice crisp bottom in certain areas.
Gotcha. Okay. We're starting out here. Give me 5 or 6 baits. Let's say we're starting out here in this 12 to 15 foot range, and right here looks to me like a great hump little point. It's got a high spot on it right there. It's pretty shallow, pretty good break out here on the end. So we're going to start by graphing it, looking for those rocks, dropping a waypoint on those boulders, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then when we actually pick up a rod, give me the 5 baits that you're always going to have on your deck anytime you're smallmouth fishing.
For those ones out a little bit deeper, like I said, I'll start in that 12, 14-foot range. I'm going to have a drop shot, a Ned rig, and a jig. And then if I was to move in just a little bit closer, like if they aren't in that 12 to 14, maybe I'm going to move in 8 foot or less. I'll have a bladed jig, a spinner bait, and a hair jig. So there's the 6 rods that I'll probably start with on my deck tomorrow. And it'll let me go out and then in and out very quickly.
Let's take a break here from the map and let's really break down your rod reel setups and your bait setups. Let's start with the drop shot, because to me it's a smallmouth staple. They catch them everywhere in the world on a drop shot. I don't know how they caught a smallmouth before Aaron Martins brought the drop shot over from Japan or whatever, but it's the best smallmouth bait there is. Probably more fish get weighed in on a drop shot than anything else.
Yep.
Rod, reel, line, weight, bait, hook. Go.
So I am going to use a 6'10" medium light Arc Invoker Tour. I prefer a lighter rod. It's not for everyone, but I would actually even go lighter than that. I just like a real light rod anytime I'm smallmouth fishing. An Arc Gravity G5 3000 size spinning reel. I'm gonna put 16-pound test Sunline Overwatch braid on there with 10-pound sniper leader for drop shot. That is. So we're going to talk about some of the different sizes, because I know you are a light line guy, and from talking with me, I'm not. So 10 is about the lightest I will go. A lot of people like that 6, 7, 8. I personally believe if I don't lose a fish, it's worth, from breakoffs, it's worth more than not getting a bite. So that's why I always opt for the 10 across the board on drop shots. Been throwing it a lot this year for the first time. It's the Gamakatsu. It's the new, I think it's the Stinger drop shot hook. It's a hook that I like to use a lot now that we have forward facing sonar, because I can thread a bait on them. So what that does is when you thread the bait on the hook, it's just putting the bait further up on the hook shank. And what that does, it gives you the ability, as if a fish catches that bait as it's falling, I personally believe more of that bait is just going to get in the fish's mouth, versus when we have the standard typical circle style drop shot hooks where hook the bait. You just have more worm that doesn't have the hook on it. If a fish catches it, he might not catch the hook, and you don't hook them as much. So that's kind of where, for the most part, I'm probably using that Stinger style hook 98% of the time for drop shot anymore. And then anywhere from a quarter all the way up to 5/8 is the weight that I'm going to throw. At Oneida, pretty much always 3/8, just due to the depth. The deeper you go, 1/2 ounce. Shallower you go, 1/4 ounce. What else?
This is the hook that you're talking about, and they just came out with this. This is a brand new design. Looks really good. I like the longer, straighter shank. I'm not a big fan of the nose hooking myself either. Sometimes if I tear a bait up or whatever, I'll hang it on the end of one of these, and I still try to get as many bites. But the threading it on there, to me, makes a big difference. So a hook like this, it's got the good keeper on it, etc.
Yeah, and I know in that photo you just showed that looks like a bigger one, which it is. I think if I was to judge that photo, I would say that's the size 1. They do have a 6, they do have a 4, a 2, a 1, a 1/0. I'm primarily using the 4, the 2, and the 1.
Okay.
I know my buddy said he used the 6, but I seen how small the 4 is, and I don't think I need to go any smaller. So if you do like that real small hook, you could even still get that real small hook in that style right there.
And those smaller hooks is part of the reason you like a lighter rod too. It just keeps those fish pinned a little bit better.
Yeah, I just never liked a really stiff rod. I did find myself breaking some hooks in the past, and this is a long time ago.
Right.
Because I horse fish. I'm not throwing 6, 7-pound tests. I throw 10-pound tests. So for me, I'm not trying to fight a fish for 5, 10 minutes. It's just not part of what I've ever done, and smallmouth fish for my whole life now. So I'm really not gonna change the way I did it. So that's kind of why I, typically use the lighter rod. I think it just, it's a little give on the hooks, because some of them are thin wire, but that's key for hooking some of those smallmouth.
When it comes to plastics, that seems to be the big debate. Spro's got the CJ Smasher. There's the Berkeley flatworm that took the world by storm a few years ago. A lot of people put like 2/8 Kitex or little bitty swim baits on them. Talk about, kind of your bait selection.
Yeah, and selection, it's kind of one of those it's evolving. It still is. Like we had a discussion. Like you're throwing dice now, you're throwing little shrimp baits, and they're all really good. But a lot of the stuff that's worked for years and years still does work. I think the biggest thing now is to just be mindful on just little tweaks and sometimes how the fish are biting it. The way a fish actually, especially a smallmouth, I feel like is hooked and bites it, I think tells you a lot about the bait you need to be throwing. If you're throwing something that has a lot of action or it's a little bit bigger and they're just not getting hooked real well, it's probably telling you that they aren't wanting to take that bait deep down in the crushers. So if you dial it back a little bit, maybe you go to small swim bait style like you were just mentioned, or maybe just a bait with a little bit less action, I've noticed that get more bites. So for me, I have like 4 or 5 baits that I typically rotate through. So I'll throw a flatworm like everyone else in the world. I'll throw a Zoom Z drop, the Mega Bass Haze Dong. That's another
Mm-hmm.
good one I like. What else? I still throw not as much now. The Yamamoto one. I forget what
Shad shape worm.
head shape worm. That was what got me started years ago. Don't throw that one as much. Got them in my boat. If there's ever a day that I want to pull it out and utilize it. And then lastly for me is just a Elastec bait. Most of those Elastec baits have no action. Love them. Just for those certain types of fish that get real finicky. And that's one thing. That's basically my main 5. Like I said, now you're throwing dice and shrimp, and I do try those. Trying to figure out when and where those work like better. I haven't figured that out yet. Still too new.
It took me a while to really catch on to the dice deal, and I couldn't figure out what these fish thought it was that they were eating. And Rob G and I had the conversation the other day that these fish don't know how big they are.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're a minnow, they're 2 inches long, a fingerling. They're eating plankton and little bitty tiny bugs and all this stuff in the water that looks like those dice. Well, they've gotten bigger and they've not seen that in a year or 2 years or whatever because they're so small, they're eating bigger stuff. But as soon as you drop something like that in front of them, especially if they've not seen it and they've seen a million freaking flatworms, they're like, oh, there's a plankton like I used to eat. Dunk.
Yep. Well, for me, one thing I say is we've caught fish on jigs for how many years? Don't you think they might think a dice is a jig just without a weight?
It's just a skirt. Yeah, I get it.
It's a weightless jig.
Yeah.
Flares out. Same thing as a jig does underwater. I've noticed they do hit it a little bit harder. So therefore, I feel like it's more like a jig bite. Like I feel like when you throw your traditional smallmouth drop shot baits, it's more of like a tick tick, they're there. I've noticed with dice style baits, it's more of like they're there. Kind of like a jig. They knock it one time pretty hard. I don't know. Might just be my theory, but that's what I've seen so far. So right now, I'm comparing it to a weightless jig.
There you heard it here first. The fuzzy dice, the hairy ball is a weightless jig.
Yep.
The second bait you mentioned was a drop shot. Or excuse me, was a Ned rig.
Ned rig.
Standard Z-Man.
Standard as it can get. I don't think it really matters as long as you're throwing something that's like 2.5 to 3 inches. Really has no action at all. It's just a little bait that they just can't resist.
What about a minnow? Are you throwing one of those very much?
No.
Not a minnow guy.
Mm-mm. I have one rigged up, but I don't throw it that much. I mean, I won't throw it in the next 3 days at Oneida. I'll throw it some when we go to St. Clair, just because they do school a little bit more on bait fish there, while Oneida is more of like a goby crayfish lake.
Okay.
That's kind of the difference. I just prefer to throw something that they're going to follow down to the bottom versus bring them all the way to my boat and then you're never going to see them again.
You brought up something there just a second ago that kind of passed me by. When we were talking about drop shot baits and threaded on the hook and that kind of thing, with the fish catching it out of the air, I mean, out of the water, obviously, but when you're looking at them on scope, a lot of times they'll catch baits out of air. Is that what you're wanting them to do, or you want them to follow it all the way to the bottom and then eat it?
It varies. It depends on how the fish are eating for the day. I've seen days where they catch it, and for some reason, those days, there are days that they'll catch it and they never get the hook part. There's other days that they catch it and they just start going and you got them gut hooked. So the catching is one of the scariest ones in my opinion, because I don't know that they got that hook. So when you see them catch it using forward facing sonar, even if you're not using forward facing sonar, you throw it out there and you feel it going down and all of a sudden it gets slack, you don't know if they have that hook or not. And you have no choice but to set it. At least when they go to the bottom, you can visibly see them go down to it. And I feel like it just gives it a better shot. Because if you set the hook on the bottom, if you miss it, they could come back. Those ones that catch it, if you miss it, I don't think they come back. I think you got one shot at the ones that catch it, and it's for them to catch it and have the hook. And if they don't, you got no chance.
There you go. Any other baits that we need to talk about? The spinner bait, bladed jig, all that stuff's pretty standard. The hair jig is something that's a little bit foreign to me. I've never caught one on it. I've got some. I think it's really, really cool. Let's talk about a hair jig just a tick and what the right situation is for it.
So hair jig, it's got to be calm because it's one of those baits that you're throwing so light. It's either going to be a 3/32 or a 1/8 ounce. So if you have any little bit of wind, you're really not going to be able to throw it. You're really not going to be able to fish it well. It's more of a calm, shallow water bait. And for me, it's one of those baits that it's a guaranteed bite when it's calm. Like you can go shallow with a chatterbait, a bladed jig, a spinner bait. If it's too calm, you're guaranteed to probably not get bites with those baits. So you could pull out a hair jig and essentially get those bites. I always throw black. For me, if I'm fishing 6 foot or less, I use a 3/32. Anything 6 foot or deeper, which is usually like 6 foot to like 8 or 9 feet, is the 1/8 ounce. And I've heard a lot of people say they've never caught fish on it. I'm going to tell them that I think their biggest problem is that they've never caught fish is because when they fished it too fast. Now they might say, well, no, I fished it slow. Fish it slower. Because I'm guilty. I've noticed myself sometimes too. I'm out there fishing it and I'm fishing it slow, not getting bit. And then in my head, I'm like, try a little slower. Like how you know you're supposed to. Slow it down even more and you get bit. There's just something about how slow and still that bait needs to be going through the water to trigger a bite. Now, I know people might think the opposite. A little faster would trigger a bite. I don't think that's the case with these smallmouth on those hair jigs. The slower, the better, and the more you can keep that bait off the bottom. That's the key. When it touches the bottom, it's over.
And you almost fish it like a swim bait, like you're throwing it out and just reeling it back, right? Not shaking your rod, not doing anything.
Nope.
Like a spinner bait, like a whatever.
Yep. The only time I will shake my rod is basically my retrieve is throw it out, and I'm constantly just like this, reeling it, tip up. And if I see a fish coming behind it, I'll keep going slow and steady. And then the moment he gets like right to it, if he don't go for it, I'll give it one pop. And usually that's when he goes and gets it. But
That's
other than
juicy.
that's the only way I've ever had success on it. Sometimes those pops don't get it done, and you just constantly got to keep slow and slow and slow and just hoping. It's just a matter of the day, the time, the attitude of the bass.
Can you scope them on it as well?
You can. It's
Are
hard.
you putting?
It's hard to see that little fly though.
No doubt,
But
doubt.
when you find it, you usually don't find it until it's like 30 to 40 feet. Sometimes you find the bait, or not the bait, you find the fish before the bait. Like if the fish is trailing it.
Do you put a little piece of Cinco or a little piece of flatworm or something on the hook to try to give it some more weight to be able to throw?
Yeah, I do. Just put a little, whatever color black junk piece of worm I have sitting somewhere.
colors to me for smallmouth are super simple.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, green pumpkin, watermelon candy, green pumpkin purple, some sort of green pumpkin, and that's pretty much all you need.
Yeah, I keep it very simple. I like blacks. I like green pumpkins. I like whites, and then anything that kind of has like a perch hue to it. Maybe not even necessarily perch. I don't like the color perch, like plastics that are made and called perch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like all the orange that they put in them, but just something that has a little bit of something that kind of gives off a hue of a perch, which also mimics crawdad. Because up north, you got a lot of orange pinchers on the crayfish and stuff like that. So I think it can go kind of hand in hand. So, like, same with a Ned rig. Um, I think there's a couple colors that have a little bit of red flake in them, some that have a little bit of orange silver flake in them. I think you're killing two birds with one stone on that one. You kind of have a crawfish imitating bait. At the same time, you have a perch bait if they're chasing perch and you get cast out there in the perch.
It's so simple, but yet so tough at times
Mm-hmm.
to find them when they move. Most of the time, when these, let's say we're catching them on that area that we just talked about, that little point with the hump and all that kind of thing. When you roll up there and you don't see them, or you only catch one and there's been 100 there, what causes those smallmouth to move most of the time? Are they strictly bait related? Is it wind? Is it watercolor? Where where do you lose them when you lose them?
I think a lot of times with smallmouth is the structure areas, it's just the feeding zones. And you kind of got to wait till they get there. Like, I don't think we necessarily catch that many smallmouth not on feeding zones, in the rock clumps mixed with grass, the shallow sand areas. So out in the open, you don't see them that much unless you're on a place like Champlain or St. Clair where they're out actually chasing bait fish. That's different. But the ones that are more related to the bottom, Oneida, Cayuga's got some of those fish like that, Ontario. I think those fish you kind of just gotta pull up to the right stretch at the right time. I think those fish slide out and then they come back to feed, and you only catch them when they come back to feed. Like, you can't really go chasing them down out sometimes. They go to the bottom, you can never see them, things like that. Oneida specifically, I don't catch a ton of fish on scope. I do use scope, but I don't go to a spot and look at it at Oneida and be like, there's nothing here, I'm not making a cast. I cast everywhere at Oneida that I plan on fishing because I know how much they stay tight to the bottom. They glue to the bottom. They get in rocks. Actually, I think some of the biggest fish you catch at Oneida are ones you don't see. And that's proven. Like, when I was there a month ago, me and my dad fished a tournament. I stayed up front, scoped around, looked at scope, made some casts in between scoping. He's just sitting out the back of the boat. He caught a 555 and a 525 in one day. And a 5-pounder at Oneida ain't that common.
Mega.
And all he was doing was just dragging. Like, he set the hook on the bigger one, and I kid you not, it was about 180 feet out from the boat. He can't cast that far. But as I was trolling around, he was just thumbing it and just letting the line out and letting the line out and then just dragging it over. Like, when it jumped, it was a mile away. So you can't just go by not seeing a fish on scope, especially at a place like Oneida, because they're there. They really are. It's just, they just get super tight to the bottom.
And you can't side image those fish either. Even with as good as side imaging is,
The
to
only
me,
time you can is when there's big boulders. Has to be giant rocks.
and then you can see them around them.
Mm-hmm. It's the only time.
But on smaller stuff and that kind of thing, I think they either swim away from the boat and feel it, or they're stuck so tight to the bottom. There's a really cool video floating around on social media. I'm sure some of our viewers have watched it before, but it's these smallmouth that's sitting on top of a big boulder, and they are like stuck to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can just barely see the boulder for all these smallmouth on top. And I mean, their bellies are literally touching it. And stuff like that, you just can't see on a graph, even on live scope.
I remember, I'll give you a good one. This one might give you a laugh. I think it was 2 years ago at the St. Lawrence River. We were in the weigh-in line. And I said something. And I was like, man, I couldn't keep my 360 in the water today from the waves. And New is behind me, and he goes, "What do you need that for, anyways? Just look at the scope and cast at them." And I'm like, "Dude, I cast without seeing them." He goes, "You actually make a cast without seeing a fish?" And I was like, "Yeah, I caught my two biggest ones of the day on rock that I seen on 360, and I just flung it over to where the rock was. And then by the time I got my scope over there, it's going down, and you see a fish go down with it."
And couldn't. I mean, that's. I feel like that's the way fishing is now. Like, why would you throw at them if you can't see them?
Yeah, I love not seeing them. I really do.
That's cool. You were talking about big waves. Let's transition here just a second. A weekend guy that travels, 30 minutes to the lake and back, and we're on a river, and it may get rough occasionally, but most of the time we're not go out there when it gets rough. Boat maintenance is super important anytime you're up north and you're on big water. Talk a little bit about some extra precautions that you do and things that you do to prepare with really rough water.
Biggest one is that trolling motor. You got to make sure that is tight, because that trolling motor gets really loose, and the moment it gets loose, even just the slightest bit, those bolts are either going to bend like crazy or they're just going to completely shear. Years ago, it's actually a pretty scary thing in a tournament. A good buddy of mine, the boat he was in, everything sheared and the motor came right over his shoulder. He was a co-angler. Didn't hit him somehow, but they hit a wave and the entire trolling motor like literally ripped off the boat and came over his shoulder. And he was like scarred. So those things are definitely something you need to make sure you always are up on. And I know it's a pain, especially with all the grass we have now, to get up under there and tighten them. And I know you're gonna have to, because I know how many times I've walked by the front of the boat and I just take a screwdriver to the top and it's slightly loose, and I'm like, I don't feel like going to tighten that. But trust me, it's worth it. It could potentially save a disaster from happening. And then as you work down the boat, keep your graphs tight. That's, don't want to lose these graphs. They're definitely expensive, and they get loose all the time in the rough condition. It doesn't matter what bracket you have, what mount you have. The waves we go out in, sometimes when they get over 4 feet, it hurts. It hurts us. It hurts the boat. It hurts the graphs. It hurts the mounts. Like, it all takes a beating. And then the motor and the jack plate, just make sure that's tight. For me, rule of thumb, anytime I'm out there in like 4 or 5 rough days, I'm probably checking it every other day.
What is a rough day? Now, Kentucky Lake gets really, really rough. I've been in 2 waves at Kentucky Lake that you couldn't see land. I've speared a few of them, but to me the waves when you get on northern fisheries, especially the Great Lakes, you can have some 7 or 8 footers and still move around. Talk about driving a boat in big water.
Yeah, it varies depending on direction. That's going to be your number one. But it also depends on what we classify as rough and how hard you are on your equipment. Depends on, is it practice or a tournament? Because if it's practice and there's 5, 6 footers, I can be very gracious on my equipment. I could take it very easy. Really don't have places to be necessarily on a time crunch, so I can take it easy. I don't have to go up and slam a wave. I can back down, take it as easy as I can. Those days you don't necessarily need to check everything, because you're probably not going to loosen things. But the days like the tournament days, you have 3 days wide open, you're running, it gets rough every day. You probably should be checking it every single day. The tournament days, if you're going to be beating the boat. And by that, I mean anytime you're slamming waves or you really feel the boat rattling. If you feel it rattle, chances are all the equipment's rattling and getting loose, inch by inch. So,
Well, when you get in that big water, will you try to ride a trough? Will you try to surf one big wave? What are you trying to do? Not necessarily on Oneida, because I know they stack up a little bit different there, but let's say you're on Ontario or you're on Erie, where there gets just giant rollers out there. Talk
yeah,
about how to run those things.
what I do is I try to, hopefully it's run into them as long as I can. And I'll run them and run into them and run into them as much as I can until I can find the perfect angle to where I want to go. And then go that entire way. So I know there's been times where I might want to go out and left a couple miles, but I might actually run out 7, 8 miles straight and then run across because I know that I can just stay on top of those waves going out into them. And then when I want to turn, even if it's 5, 6, 7 footers, if you make that turn and you're in every trough, you can roll 60 some miles an hour as long as you get in the right angle. But if you don't make it perfect, like if you cut yourself a mile short when you go out into them, you ain't going to have that perfect angle. So it's all about, time on the water and learning that. Those type of scenarios are tough because you got to also think about the ride back in. So if you go out in them, you have to essentially come back with them, which is always the biggest complication. Now, if they're big, you can kind of go up and down and up and down. But if they're that, mid-range 5, 6 footers, it's hard to go with 5, 6 footers without taking them over the bow because you're going to go up and then the next one's going to come over. And that's just one thing you got to kind of pre-plan. And, some of the fisheries that we go to, there might be more than one way out. So if there is, you just got to see what the best route is, even though it might not be the shortest distance.
Well, you try to run 45s on them to where you can kind of go up one and down and then back up, or
I like to do the 45s if they're only like, 2, 3, and 4 footers. But
okay.
once you get bigger than that, you do those 45s, and one side of your boat might not have a rub rail on at the end of it.
Tell me the roughest water you've ever been in.
Roughest water, as in what hurt the most, was this year on the Pasquotank. It was by far not the biggest I've ever seen, but every time you went up and down on a wave there, it felt like you were running into a wall of concrete. Like there was just something about how hard that water was there. It broke a lot of things. I was fortunate. I didn't break anything, but I just seen what the service yard looked like. Didn't really matter what boat brand you were in. I know I could say I'm glad I was in the Bass Cat because the Bass Cat ran great, but it was just, everything you did, you couldn't avoid just going up and then bang and bang. Every wave that we had, it was kind of, you wouldn't even believe what guys ran out in on day one. Like, you would think we're crazy.
Right. Y'all are. We are.
It was one of those where they were 45s, but they were so perfectly apart. They were so perfectly close, however you want to look at it. And every one, you couldn't do nothing about it besides take it the wrong way. And it was just the entire way, no matter if you went 10 miles, 20 miles, 60 miles. And it was terrible. That was the roughest. That was
what's the biggest water you've ever been in? Biggest waves?
That was so rough, I didn't run to where I ran on day 2 the third day because I started running and I had a pinched nerve in the back of my neck, ran about 10 miles out and I could just feel it the 10 miles out where it was calm. And I was like, there's no way I'm going another 40. So I just stopped and I fished. Now, the biggest I've ever been in was last year, the final tournament of the year, day 3. I tried to go out on Lake Ontario in 10 footers.
10 footers.
Made it 1 mile. I think
10.
The only guys that truly went to the lake that day was like me and Corey. I think Stetson and a couple other guys did, but they went out the New York side and hung over where it was a little bit calmer, more protected. Me and Corey went out the roughest side.
So how do you drive in 10 footers? Or describe a 10-foot wave to me.
A 10-foot wave is one that you're just kind of like this going up and you're going up on one and you see the next one coming and you're just like this, you're almost laying back and you're like, uh-oh, what's going to happen? So what actually happened was running out and it was calm until I got there. And then when I got there, it was 70-10, like that. And I go up on the first one and I go down. And they were so big you can go like this. But you're only moving 10 miles an hour with these waves coming. So really, you ain't going anywhere. And then I see a giant one. And at this point, I'm really plowing it to get up on it. Well, as I'm plowing it, a bigger one folded over the top of it and missed me and landed on my back deck.
You were in where surfers get?
Yes. So I go up on one, and that's all I saw was the one I was going up on. And as I'm about 3/4 of the way up, the other one breaks over the top of the one I was going up, splits around the boat, and lands on my back deck. Like as it was landing, I was like this, and I looked back, and I just didn't even see motor, and I'm like, we're stopping right here and fishing. I was 0.98 miles into the lake.
Oh my gosh.
So that's where we stopped. Well, I stopped. I didn't even have a marshal, which was a good thing because I didn't want to put someone else's life in danger.
Right.
But I was also scared because I couldn't stand. I fished in a full zip life jacket, and I straddled my chair up front. Like literally, I wrapped one leg around it and one arm around it, and I had the rod in one hand.
I mean, you had to be drifting like your trolling motor's not holding anything like that, is it?
No. So what I would do is I'd just drift back. And it wasn't bad, though, when you were set up on deck in terms of you weren't taking them over because they were so big. You kind of just went way up and then would glide down with it. And then you'd go way up and glide down with it. So it wasn't bad for that because I would just glide. But when I would catch a fish, I'd have to put in spot lock because there's more than one. When I put in spot lock, as I'm landing that fish, I'm literally down on the seat landing the fish, and there's water up to my kneecaps from all the waves coming over the bow on spot lock.
Oh, God.
So like I said, I don't like to take time landing fish, but in that it takes a lot of time. So in the time that it took to land a fish, you probably took 10, 12 over the bow, get that fish, throw in the live well, get back up, take it off spot lock to make another cast. And you're just looking back and you just see the water just slowly draining out the bilge.
Bilge pump's working overtime.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I did
Okay.
like it was the biggest mistake I ever made because I did that and I caught 4 giants. And it got to the point so when I went that I was like a mile out. I drifted back. I think I caught 3. I was like, well, I'm just gonna idle that mile back. I idled the mile back out. I drifted back and only caught 1. And then I did it again and I didn't catch any. So I looked at the time and I was like, I can go back in the calm river and fish for 3 hours. I'm going to catch 1 more. And that was the biggest regret I ever made because I missed a classic last year by 1 spot. Went back in that river and I only caught 1 1-pounder in 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
I had 19 and a half for 4.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Dude, that sucks.
Yep.
I mean, just small decisions like that are what make and break.
I ended up weighing, I think it was like right at 21. Realistically, I probably needed right at 22 to make the classic.
Which 2-pounders are a dime a dozen at the St. Lawrence. Like, that decision makes sense. Looking back on it, obviously it was the wrong one.
Well, to add to that, unfortunate. So I went back, hit a couple like big fish areas, and it wasn't happening on the big fish areas. And I was like, this is dumb. I could run all the way back to takeoff, and I got 2 drifts up there that they're guaranteed every time, like 3 to 3.5. And actually, the day before, when I got back up into Waddington, I did that drift. I had like 20 some pounds. I really didn't need to make the drift, but in 5 casts on the same drift, I caught 17 pounds. So I was like, I'm going to go back there, catch the 5th one. On my way back, I blew the lower unit. Never got to make another cast.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
And cost you for making the classic. That's how close it can be.
Yep.
That is how close it can be. Okay, I want the wildest thing you've ever seen on the water. Like maybe 2 people up on the bank making love, or a squirrel riding a buck across the river. Like, tell me the wildest thing you've ever seen on the water, Jonathan Kelley.
Well, it was at the St. Lawrence River. It was the year I qualified for the elites and the opens, and it was their first year where they were filming on day 3.
Okay.
So we get to my starting spot, and out from me is another guy from our area that happened to, I think, come up and take photos and do some stuff for bass. So he was out in the distance in his boat beyond me. and I'm fishing, and I got the cameraman on my back deck pointed straight at me, and I'm fishing, and like I see what's going on, but the cameraman don't. So I'm laughing to myself, and then I hear the other guy out there taking photos laughing his absolute ass off. So I look over to him, and I'm like, "So you see what I'm seeing, right?" He goes, "Yeah." And I look at the cameraman. I'm like, "Can you see like what you're filming over my shoulder?" And he goes, "No, what?" And he pulls the camera down. There's a family of 4 on the Canadian side taking a bath in the river. Mom and dad are butt ass naked.
Really?
Yes.
Just naked people
Bubble
right there in
trail,
the river.
bubble trail floating down and everything. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going to fish my shallow sand patch today. 'Cause
Bathing in the lake or the rivers. I don't think I've heard that one before.
the cameraman had no idea they were there, and they were there for a solid 20 minutes before I made him aware.
That is awesome. All right.
Closed. We're clothed.
That's
Yeah.
just naked.
Yep.
All right. What is your most embarrassing moment at a tournament ever?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess it's good that it's tough because that means I really ain't done anything too stupid.
Or the funniest thing that's ever happened to you? Don't necessarily have to be embarrassing.
Funniest thing, not really ever. It's not that funny, but like it happened at the 10 killer tournament. I had a fish jump out of the live well, and I've never had that happen. Like it's the things you see in the videos, and it gives you a good laugh because like
Right.
it's like old timers. I open the live well, and this fish literally comes up right in front of my face as I'm like hovered over it, jumps out and lands on the back deck going down into the jack plate. And I somehow like leapfrogged from down in the cockpit all the way to the back and plastered him on the upper part of the jack plate. Like he literally could have just went another inch and tucked in the jack plate, or an inch shorter and went in the jack plate and in the water and gone. I mean, I thought it was funny. Unfortunately, I was laughing during the tournament. That's all I could think of is just old videos where you see guys losing fish.
Right. Like Billy McDonald.
Yes.
It happened to him in Florida on live.
Yeah. But I don't really think I have any embarrassing moments. I feel like I've been fortunate enough to keep myself out of that. Hopefully we don't find one in the next 2 weeks.
Well, I kind of hope you do. I hope we do have 2 really good tournaments, but like something happens and you poop your britches or something funny, and that way next time you get on here we can talk about it.
I've never done that. I got a story about a buddy that did that once. It's pretty funny. Actually, really funny.
I don't know why anybody would poop their britches on a boat. Like, I don't know why everybody makes it so complicated. You literally just hang it off the side right there in the cockpit. It's so simple.
I got a good one. So we were in college. Called my buddy. We're talking about fishing throughout the day. And all of a sudden I hear, I'm like, what the fuck was that? His partner calls me and goes, sorry. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, well, he dropped his phone in the lake. And when he dropped his phone in the lake, he bent down to try to grab it and pooped his bridges in the same time of that motion. So I'm calling you on my phone to let you know that we're down a phone and underwear. And
That's a good one, dude.
not me though.
That is a good one. Everybody's got good friends like that. Maybe they'll be watching, drop a comment on, and out themselves. I think I would if I'd done that.
That's one of the best ones I've ever heard of. To do 2 in one showing, that's pretty impressive.
That is pretty awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing some smallmouth knowledge. Guys, go follow Jonathan Kelley Fishing, JTK Fishing on Instagram. You got the Facebooks, you got the TikToks, you got it all.
Yep. Jonathan Kelley fishing on all of them.
Go check him out. Guys, you can take it to the bank.
Yeah, you can take it to the bank. Hold the line, hey, you know we on the way all the time.